Today I'm going to be sharing some essential techniques for working in watercolor pencil with you. These techniques are essential if you're just starting out, but they're also going to give you a little taste of traditional watercolor. I think they're a perfect medium if you want to get started in watercolor, but you would like a little more control. But if you already work in watercolor, I think you'll appreciate how you can use watercolor pencil to add variety to your work. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I've gone ahead and transferred my tulip onto this piece of watercolor paper. This is Arch's 140-pound cold press, and I'm using the smoother side because I don't really want too much texture showing with my watercolor pencils. You can find the outline for this tulip on my Etsy shop if you'd like to follow along. I'm using Faber-Castell Elbrick Durer pencils, but you can use whatever watercolor pencils you have on hand. The specific colors I'm using is this pinky color called Light Carmine, Red Violet, Light Cadmium Yellow, May Green, Chrome Oxide Green, and then finally Terracotta, which is kind of an optional color. I don't use very much of it. If you happen to have something that matches this, great, but it's definitely not necessary. You can use this swatch and match it to whatever colors you have available. First thing I'm going to do is apply some yellow to the base of this flower. If you look at the reference photo, you can see the yellow is almost more of a greeny color, but I'm going to stick with the yellow because the yellow and the pink will blend nicely together. There's no reason you couldn't go into a little more green. The green works well in the shadows. Now you will notice I do have fairly visible pencil lines here. I'm not too crazy about having dark lines. It does show well on the camera, but sometimes the graphite doesn't blend so well with your watercolor pencils. So you can always take a kneadable eraser and just lift a little bit out. You don't want to lose your lines. You want to still see where you're going. But if you're coming to areas that are quite light, such as where I'm working with this yellow right now, I don't want those lines to be too visible. So I'm just kind of coloring in here. I'm using a slight bit more pressure at the base of the flower and then lifting off the pressure. So I'm not coloring quite as hard as I work my way up. And right now I just use a circular coloring motion, but we're going to be changing that up in a few minutes here. So just put a little bit of yellow in here because I see a very small amount. Again, looking at the reference photo, I see a little bit of yellow here. I'm going to lift these lines a bit as well because these ones, I don't want them to be too dark. And just fill in a little bit there, maybe a little bit here. And again, I'm kind of doing a circular motion, but slightly starting to move in the direction of these lines that you can actually see within the tulip. There's kind of some creases and folds that kind of move this way. They kind of move upwards on the petal, upwards and then out. So you're going to see that more when I move into the pinks. It's hard to see it too much in the yellows. And then right here, I'm going to, let's lift those. The yellow is a color that really doesn't mix well with the graphite. So I'm just going to lift a little tiny bit more. And I've used very heavy pressure here. If you feel like you want a little bit of a dull orange on these little stamen, you could add them, but it looks totally fine with just that bright yellow. So if you want to keep it simple, just leave it yellow and you don't even have to worry about adding any extra little colors on there. Now, before I add water, I want to lift these pencil lines just a little more because once I apply water, those graphite lines or pencil lines are going to become permanent. And so this is a good time to kind of lift things just a bit more so that I don't have a lot of deep dark graphite on my page. So now I'm ready to blend this out. I've got my water here. I've got a couple of brushes. These are Simply Simmons round brushes. I have a 6 and an 8. I really like these particular brushes because they're a little firmer. They hold a little bit less water than some watercolor brushes will, and that will help with water control, especially if you're just starting out. That's the beauty as well of watercolor pencils, is that it's a great way to learn water control. And so if you're just new to watercolor pencils can be a really, really good medium to start out with. So what I'm going to do, I'm dipping my brush. Right now I have the 8, but I'll be moving into the 6 as well. Dipping it into my water, tapping it off on my paper towel so that I'm not too wet. And then I'm going to start in this area where there really isn't any color yet. I'm going to start applying some water. I need a little more. So I've got more on my brush now. And I'm working my way down into this yellow area. And then I'm going to wash my brush, dry it, and I'm going to come up from the other side as well. I don't want to get too much yellow down here. I'll kind of blend that around. Now I want to be careful right here. I don't want too much yellow. If you look in the reference photo, you can see clearly it is kind of more of a white color down here, isn't it? So I don't want to get too much of the yellow pigments in there. Okay, so that was a little more tricky, that shape. So we're starting again in the light area, dragging down into the dark. And that way we get a nice smooth transition between the white areas or the clear areas of this painting and our color. If I had a lot of color going on here, I'd have to do one petal at a time. But because there's not too many pieces here with yellow, I can just do all my yellows at one time in terms of blending. So just add a little water there. And then over here, once again, start in your light area, work your way into the dark. This is where a lot of beginners can actually struggle because they start blending in their darks and then they drag those colors up into the lights and they lose their light areas. I'm just noticing this area is still dry, so I can get away with this. Putting a little more yellow right in there because I see a little bit and I missed putting it on earlier. Just go like that, call that good. And then this shape. So I'll put the water once again, working in my lightest areas and then working from the lightest to the darkest. So that's very vibrant yellow. If you feel like, whoa, okay, that's more yellow than you even want, it's easy to remove. So I'm just gonna go ahead, blend everything around. And you can lift a little bit. So what you can do is tap your brush off, like clean your brush, tap it off on the paper towel, and then you can come in and we call this a thirsty brush. You can lift some of the pigment out. I don't want to lift it all out, but you can lift a bit of it out. It will often dry a smidge lighter too, so be aware of that. All right, I'm gonna just make sure I'm happy with how smooth it is. And again, you can see whenever I'm getting too much pigment on my brush, I tap it off. One last thing, if everything's not too wet around these little stamen, I can just kind of tap the little yellow areas a little bit. My brush is quite dry now. And I'm just kind of tapping with a damp brush to get that nice, vibrant yellow and have a little bit of a blended effect. If I want a little more of this color, while it's still wet, I can just take a little bit right off the pencil and tap a little bit. I'm not going to worry about all the little details that you can see. I can get a little bit on there, but I'm just going to try and keep things fairly simple. So I do a little bit of linear painting there with my brush, and again, my brush is quite dry at this stage. You don't want to be too wet or everything will just go bleeding everywhere. So now that I've got my yellows blended, I'm going to go ahead and dry it. I'm going to use the hair dryer to make the process faster, but that's going to allow this yellow pigment to kind of set into the paper and so that it won't lift too much, and it's going to allow us to come over with a second layer using our pink watercolor pencils. So I will go dry this and then I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so now that this is dry, we're going to come in with our second layer, and I'm going to use this carmine red. It's actually a light carmine red, and I'm going to just lay it on, but I'm going to pay attention now a little bit more to the direction of my pencil strokes. And so why don't we start in this big petal? It's probably one of the easier ones to start with. And we're going to pay attention both to pressure and to direction. So by pressure, I mean, I'm going to use light pressure to start with because you can see it's very light in this area here. It gets darker as we come up into certain areas, like right here it's dark, but right here it's fairly light where it's coming down into the yellows. So I'm just going to use light pressure, and you can see I'm moving my pencil in the direction of the creases and the folds in the petal. So I'm going to come up here, and up here I can go quite a bit darker. And I'm still paying attention to the creases and folds. They don't matter quite as much, but I'm going to just come along here and then just drag this down a bit. So I can go with heavier pressure up here. It's quite dark and it's a very pretty pink. So just put a little more pressure and kind of fill up to the top. I might try and maintain a little bit of a light edge up there. It's pretty small, so I'm not going to be too particular about it. And then I'm going to come down here, and this is where we have these beautiful, this kind of the beautiful center here, that we have this really nice defined line on our tulip. It's going to help make it look like a tulip. And then come over here, and once again, I'm going to pay attention to the direction of my coloring. And you can take this as slow as you want to, and that's the beauty of watercolor pencils. Most people have some familiarity with coloring pencils. This is going to be slightly different because we're going to be blending and we're getting some watercolor techniques in place here. But you have the benefit of using a pencil, and so you get that same control that you're used to having with a pencil. I'm going to come in here a little darker. I honestly think watercolor pencils is a great medium if you're just wanting to get going in watercolor and yet you're not sure about the water control part. This is perfect because if I'm doing watercolor, I try and achieve these creases and folds with the pigment a little more challenging, whereas you can take all the time you need to play with this because there's no water involved yet. We'll get the water coming in a bit. So let's come up here. I'm going to pay attention to the creases and folds I see here. This is interesting. I feel like there's a little bit of a swirliness. Do you see that in the reference photo? Some of it swirls a bit this way, actually, and some of it swirls this way. I feel like maybe the S shape goes a little bit towards the outside a bit, and then it curves in as well. So get that on there. I'll fill this in. It's a little darker right at the edge here. So again, I'm still paying attention to the overall direction. I'm not going like coloring like this, right? I'm still paying attention to how things are more or less moving within this petal. Now, I can't see as clearly the direction here, so it's not quite as essential. If you can't see what's happening, it doesn't matter as much. You can just color it anyway. All right, I'm going to come a little darker in here. And then come over here. And you can see there's a little bit of light space on the top. I do want to kind of leave that. You can slightly see it. I can just outline it for you so you can see where it is. It's kind of about there-ish. And then I'm going to come in here and just fill this in. And the thing that sets this petal apart from the petals in front is that it is that tiny bit darker. So I'm going to come in here. I'm actually going to put heavier pressure right here along the top edge. We'll get some darker colors as well, but let's just use a little heavy pressure to achieve that look. I can even do a little bit of that right here. Let's do that. Put a little bit more pressure. So much of this is about the pencil pressure you use, which is wonderful. It makes it just a matter of just varying how much pressure you apply or not. This one, really, we could put even more pressure right here too, couldn't we? Because it could get a bit darker. And I use both a combination of layering and pressure to achieve the differences of value. So the lights versus the darks. Okay, really light pressure here. This is a very soft pink as we come along here. I'm not going to put too much on there. Then it gets dark underneath. So let's come in here. No, it kind of almost folds over, and as it folds, it gets dark in there. Just fill this in. And again, this area, I don't think it's as essential to worry about the creases and folds. I don't feel like I see them very clearly there. So we'll just let that be like that. And let's come over to this one now. There's no rhyme or reason for which petal I pick first. With watercolor pencil, you have a lot of freedom to just go ahead and just color your whole flower. And we're going to come and talk about blending. And the blending matters, the steps that you take, but we'll talk about that after. It's a little bit similar to watercolor, regular traditional watercolor in that way. All right, quite dark back here. Whenever you see my pencil pause, it's because I'm looking up at my reference photo. Usually that's what's going on, and I would recommend you always keep a reference photo handy. You can download the one for this in the description below. You can download it and put it on your own device. So if you can zoom in on it, you'll be able to have a little more success than if you're just following me. Okay, a little bit light there, but I'm thinking this is fairly soft. I'm going to just put a little bit of pressure. I'm going to do a bit of circular motion, just like this. Again, just want something really soft to fill that area in, and then it gets darker down here. And I'm not going to worry about the fact, like I say, it has a hint of green in some of these areas. It's kind of in shadow. I'm not going to worry about that for today. Let's just pay attention to these little bit of pink that's coming through here. But I'm not going to get these dark shadows in. We'll just let it be yellow. Keep things more or less simple. Okay, now we're on to this front one, and I see a little bit of this, line here. It's very faint, but you can see more of a line. And I'm going to start following the direction again of the creases and folds. I'm going to start light because things are a little faint down here, and then I'm going to add more pressure as I go. So we'll just do it light first. And we do have this shape here that's lighter, so pay attention. We can actually, if you don't want to lose it, we could come in with the dark and the light first. So right here you can see it's definitely dark. We can achieve that. So we can get that really dark section in there. So we leave it till everything's covered in pencil, we might get lost. Okay, and then here, some nice darks. Let's go ahead with this dark here. Again, you can notice I'm going in the direction Same direction, and then we'll just work our way up until we get to the top. Okay, what do we have here? You can color softly if you want, just to fill this section in. And then I'm going to pay attention again. I'm seeing some differences in the shapes of the shadows here. So I'm going to just put more pressure wherever I see it gets a little darker. And it's always better to start on the light side if you're not sure, because as you can tell, things change when you add water. So you can always start lighter and add another layer, and we'll talk about layers after. So you can really do as many layers as you want. Once you get a ton of pigment on, then you can start running into a little bit of a challenge, like if you've got lots of layers and they're all dark. But if you're working lightly, you can get away with quite a few layers. Maybe something like that. And now we just have this one left. Let's go ahead and fill it in with kind of medium pressure. I'm going to do, again, let's make sure we get this nice line here in the center here. Again, this is so much of what makes up a tulip petal in my mind. It's got that nice kind of center right in the middle of the petal. I'm going to do the darks again so that we don't lose them. Just a sec. This comes like this, and then this. It's a little more challenging because of the number of like details on this. You could pick an easier tulip if you wanted to, and you wouldn't have some of these interesting little details. But that's what makes this so beautiful in the end, I think, is having these extra little changes of color and value, and just the whole position of this particular tulip just adds a little something. But if you had a tulip that was standing upright and you couldn't see the center, you might find that the easiest one to start out with, and then work your way into a tulip like this, where it's got, you know, just you can see the yellows in this tulip and the center of the tulip. Those both add just a slight bit of complexity. And I'm going to come in here. Because you can kind of see there's a little bit of a division line. This actually, this piece here is part of this petal, if you look close at the photo. I'm going to repeat the steps for blending, but this time I will have to be conscious of which petal I do when, so that they don't all bleed and mush together. And you'll see what I mean in a second. So first things first, let's start over here where we started before. So I'm just going to apply the water. And then I'm going to work my way into where the pigment is, and I'm going to pull it down a little bit. My brush is not super wet, but it's wet enough that I'm able to pull those pigments downwards, and then I'll work my way up. I'm going to come into the lighter area up here. I'm going to move my brush sort of in the direction of those creases and folds. Okay, and then I'm going to come in and do the darkest part. Again, moving my brush kind of in this scrubbing motion, same direction as the creases and folds. And this particular brush, it's also firmer, the Simply Simmons brushes, which does allow you to kind of almost, I don't want to say scrub, but it helps with the blending. If you have a really soft brush, it can just sometimes not blend quite the same. So slightly firmer brush can be helpful. Okay, coming up from the bottom to the top again, wash and dry my brush. I don't want too much pigment in here. I want some, but I don't want to drown it. So let's come over here now, and I'm going to start at the bottom this time. Fill this area in. So again, you're basically always starting where your lightest area is, and in this case it's here. There's like no pigment. And work my way up. My brush feels a little too wet, so I'm just tapping it off because I want to have a little bit of that linear brush work almost happening, where you can sort of see the way that I colored. Maintain those creases and folds. Okay. Let's kind of move our way to the top. Do a little bit more of that, and then I'll come into the darkest areas. I'm already somewhat there, but we'll fill it in all the way. You can see we've maintained some of those details because we're blending with a brush that's not super wet. And there we have our first petal. Now, because things aren't super wet, you can get away with a little tiny bit more. I'm just going to tweak this a little bit. Anyways, you can get away with sometimes doing petals that are closer together. The danger is like, say if I blend this one right now and this is wet, that dark could come rushing into this petal, and those two petals could start looking like they're mushed together. So let's not do that one right now. Let's come down here. So I'm going to do this one, and I'm going to start in my lightest areas up here. You can start any area that's light on your petal, but I'm going to come up here. And then why don't we just take a little skip and come down here and do these lights. And you could even see, notice I'm washing, my water's here, but you'll notice I keep washing and drying my brush so that I don't bring too much dark pigment into my light areas at the beginning. I'm going to come in and just blend this back and forth. So I did the lights, now the darks. And as you can see, okay, I'm going to pull this down a bit now into my lights. I have a soft bit of pink down here, not too much, but there is some soft pink. And by not actually coloring as much down here, but just dragging that paint around, it helps me maintain the softness. Okay, I'm kind of scrubbing with my brush. You can probably hear that. And then I'm going to come up into here. Actually, I'm going to wash and dry my brush, so I maintain just, well, actually it's okay. We'll blend that. We'll need to get darker up here. It doesn't matter if it gets a little darker. But I'm going to come now and just do this little section. I think it's okay if it blends, because if you look in the photo, it is sort of kind of got this blurred, blended look. And so I don't mind if it's not a crisp, clean edge right here. Okay, I got a little dark up here, but that's okay. We're going to be coming in with another layer. I'm just going to guide this a little bit with a clean brush. All right, let's go ahead and just do the edge of this one this time, so the lights. So we're just going to blend the light section, and then we're going to let it dry before we do our darks, because there is a little bit of a clear distinction between the light and the dark on this petal. This is very dark, and this is very light. So just come along here and blend with my water and tap off as often as I need to. Then I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to blend this section a little bit. I might pull a little bit of the darker color I see just into here a little bit. So I brought my brush a little bit into this shape just to kind of just drag a little bit of that darker color into here. I'll do a little bit on both sides because you can sort of see that, can't you? That it's like lighter in the middle and then darker on either side of it. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that. Something like that. And is this, you know what, right along this edge, I think it's dry enough we can do this shape. If it was too wet, we'd have to be careful and just let it dry first, but just come in here and just blend a little bit here as well. Actually, I can probably come all the way down. We'll see. Let's see how this edge is. Yeah, I'm not sure if I want to blend all the way down yet because this is damp here. So I'll just blend this top edge and then I'll come back after. And it's okay if it's half blended right now because we need to get a lot more darks there. If you plan to layer more darks on top, you can get away with leaving things kind of in this in-between state. So let's just do this light section here that you can see along the top edge here. And then I probably will use the hairdryer again just to get everything in a nice state of dry. Actually, do this here. All right, I'm gonna use the hairdryer so that I can come back in and do these without having all the shapes bleed together. So I will be right back. If you're enjoying today's video, I would love to invite you to join my free newsletter. In it, you'll find creative inspiration and be the first to know about new tutorials, classes, and workshops. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, you can find a link in the description below. Now let's get back to painting. Now that everything's dry, I'm just repeating those steps, and I'm gonna just come in here and do this one. I'm using my number 6 right now. I had been using the 8 quite a bit already today, but I'm gonna use the 6. You can do whatever size brush feels comfortable for you. The smaller ones run out of water sooner, but I'm just gonna fill this in. So again, you'll notice I did those lighter shapes first, came into the dark shapes after, and right along here, I am coming along this way just to make sure I'm happy with the edge, but then I'll go a little bit this direction as well. And I will come in and layer some more colors on top. So leave that one for now. I'll just do this one. Working in the lighter area, and then I'll come work my way up and drag some of these colors downwards again. Probably I could have a little more color in here after. And carry on right along here. I'm going to just bring some of that pigment up here. Something like that. Then I'll come and do this little back shape. Well, This one's kind of wet. Let's do this one. Because I'm working so dry, I can probably jump around a little bit more because this smaller brush isn't holding as much water. I'm kind of happy with that. If you want, you could always pull a little bit of color upwards into that shape we did, because I've got that pigment on my brush now. Then I'll wash and dry my brush and just kind of gently soften the edge. This is a technique we use in watercolor, but you're seeing a little bit of, or you're seeing a lot of how there's kind of a transition between watercolor and colored pencil when you use watercolor pencil. All right, I think I'm good with doing this shape now. I'm going to ignore this tiny little one. I'm just going to work on this bigger area. So coming into the lightest area first, and then gently working my way up into this nice dark area. You can see how beautiful and rich these pigments get where I have pushed quite hard with my pencil. Makes this nice and dark. Really pretty, hey? And yet so easy. So let's go ahead and do this one. Light. I have to be careful here if I'm not too wet because I don't want to have bleed. There is a chance it could bleed, but I think I can, yeah, I can get away with it. Just doing that little shape. So once again, I started where it was yellow, worked into the pink so that I didn't obliterate the yellows. And then finally, I'm going to come up here and just do this shape, go back and forth. And if we need to smooth the edges, you know, you can change directions just enough to do that. That shape's done. It actually carries on through here a little bit. I've got enough pigment on my brush. I'll just do that little tiny little triangle. You can barely see it. And then over here, I haven't washed my brush, but I think I'm okay to just carry on wetting this little shape in here. Make sure that I keep that light section, leave that alone. Just come down here a little bit. Okay, so the last shape is just this tiny little one. If we're really careful, I might be able to blend it. Let's just feel it. I think I'm dry enough. It doesn't feel too damp. I think we're working dry, and so I can get away with blending this shape. If you have any doubt, you just dry things and then come and do shapes that are touching. That's a secret of watercolor, like traditional watercolor, as well as blending with watercolor pencil. Okay, so I'm happy with this. What I want to do now is get a little bit richer and darker in a few places. So that's where I'll add a third layer, and we're going to work with some heavy pressure pinks and even a little purple. So once I dry this, I'll be back for those next layers. Okay, so things are dry, and the best way to know if you're 100% dry, and this matters when you're going to layer more color, is you can always use the back of your hand or your wrist, and if you feel any coolness still, it means there's slight dampness in your page. So just be aware of that. You want things really nice and dry before you start actually coloring again with your pencils. Now this time what I'm going to use is the same pink. I'm going to go ahead and use heavier pressure in some places, but I'm also using this dark purple. It's also called red violet, and I'm going to use it to get some nice deep dark shadows. So you'll see how this is done. Right here, let's just start and add a little bit more of our pink. I feel like we could get a bit darker. If you're happy with how yours is though, you don't have to add more layers there. Right here, I do feel like things get darker than the pink is able to get. That's where I'm going to put a little bit of this red violet. And I'm going to do, you can see a shadow coming up here. So we're going to get over there in a minute. Just put a little more pink, come back here, nice and deep and dark up here. This is where we need to get that red violet. Whoops, sorry everybody. Just color that in. And a little bit here. Something like that. And then definitely that shadow here that we were focused on earlier. I'm going to put a little more of that color, this purpley color up here. So we get a nice shadow. Let's go in here. I'm going to do, I see this interesting little shape here. Put a little bit of the purple color, not too heavy, maybe a little more pink. You can kind of follow your gut sense to figure out how much purple versus pink. If it gets really dark, you probably want that purple, but if it's just a bit darker, just a little more pink might be enough. So you can kind of just play around with it, see what you think. You can always, as I said, err on the side of lighter and then come in later with dark if you feel like it's still not dark enough. A little more pink here. I know it does get quite dark here in this section, but I'm kind of leaning towards not overdoing it. So I'm starting out with this pink. I'm not worrying about the shadows that are so neutral colored here. We're just gonna keep this nice and simple. Again, I'm trying to pay attention to what I'm seeing for these creases, folds, sort of maintain some of that. Maybe let's just stick a little, whoops, a little bit of purple here. Now, since this is still dry, I'm just going to erase that little funny line I made there accidentally. That's one nice thing. Watercolor pencils, they don't erase as well as, say, a regular pencil, but they do lift a bit. Let's come in here. I like this. This interesting shadow. I don't have it perfect, but that's okay. Flowers are forgiving. A little bit in there. And then here, you can see a little bit of the creases and folds even with the purple. So let's just do that. A little bit in here. It gets darker in here too. I can even, if I don't want to chance lifting too much of the pink, there's no reason I couldn't even add a little more of this red color, even though it feels so dark already. Sometimes when you come over with the water again, it can lift pigments, so it's nothing wrong with adding a little more if you want to in a really nice dark area. I'm gonna come in here a little. Just maybe put just more all over this area. What do you think? I think it could get darker in this area, so I'm just gonna go ahead. A little pressure, heavier pressure using my pink pencils, so good. I think that's enough. Okay, just a touch more over here. Maybe a touch here since we're at it. I'm going to add a little more definition to this area because I kind of lifted or blended those little details out almost, so we can throw them back in. I can even put some here again. And put a little here too. Just soft pressure here. I don't want too much pencil, but I can probably get a little. And then I think we're ready to blend again. I might try and stick with a smaller brush now. I think it will make it easier because I'm going to be working in smaller shapes, but I've got my number 8 available as well if I need it. So let's see. I'm going to come in here and because I'm not as wet, I'm not filling that whole shape in this time. I'm just going to blend with this and see how it goes. So I'm just going to come over everything. I actually need a little more water. If I'm not feeling happy with it, I can always use the number 8 too if I feel like it needs a little more water. But you can see I'm getting hard edges and that's okay. I'm just going to come in now with my water and just soften it. So when I say water, I'm washing and drying my brush. Let's just move back for a minute so you can see when I add a little water and when I tap my brush off, just as I start out, and then I'll zoom in again. So I'll come in here. So kind of the lighter area. When it starts to look like, okay, I've pulled that down a bit, I can just use water. Bring it back up, work into the pinks first, then we're going to touch down on the purples. You can see how much darker that gets. I'm going to wash and dry my brush and come around, kind of almost like around the purple first, and then right into it. And just move that around a little bit. And the fact there's so many creases and folds in this petal lends itself really well to not having to have perfect blending because we want to have a little bit of the texture still, right? Some situations you might want no texture. In that case, you can just blend more. Okay, coming down here with water. This is almost like what we did before. Just gonna use a little clear water here. Okay, so you can see sometimes if I'm feeling like the paint is coming to an abrupt stop, that's where I use a wet brush, wet it, and just kind of blend a little bit. Let's go back down and do this one again. So water in the clear areas or the lighter areas, and then work my way into the darks. Oops. Okay, now into the darkest purples. So we want to make sure we don't drag that purple all kinds of places where we don't want it. So once I have purple on my brush like this, I can choose. I could go into areas where I'm like, there is purple. I could blend that purple, or else wash and dry my brush before I come into the areas that are a touch lighter. So I'm going to wash and dry my brush right now before I come into this section, just so that I don't lose that. So that's kind of the key, is that either you start in the light areas or you have to wash and then dry off your brush so you don't overdo when you come into the lights. You don't want to drag your purples into the lights. Just blend around a little bit. Almost done this petal. I like that. Okay, I'm going to come in and do some of the areas that aren't touching our wet sections. So this little shape isn't touching. Let's blend it again, and I'm going to bring a little more of that pinky color up here. And actually, because this one I'm not planning to do much, I'm going to use a fairly dry brush, a little dampish, I should say. And I'm just going to stroke this a little bit. I'm not drowning this shape with as much water, quite dry, and that's going to allow me to maintain some of the texture that I blended out last time. So the drier you are, the more texture you'll keep. I'm going to just drag it down, even like so. Okay, a little bit of water right here, just soften things. Maybe just a touch more. You can decide how much softening you want versus how much texture you want, based on how much you blend and how much water you use while you're blending. Okay, let's do this section. I think it's okay. I think this is probably dry enough. We can just gently come in here. So I'm going to do a little bit of blending in the light red area and then work my way into the purple. And yes, I hadn't come all the way to the bottom. If I need to do a bit of blending, I'll wash and dry my brush, right? So, oops, going over the line. It's okay. Okay, and if I get a hard edge there, that's where you want to come down into your yellow section first with clear water and bring it upwards. And that way you won't have a hard edge. You can kind of blend. But I think either way, it worked fine there. I think I'm probably dry enough. I can come in this section. So I'll just do the red area quick and then work my way into the little shadow color. Something like that. And I'll just drag what I have on my brush downwards into this tiny little triangle that you see here. And again, because I'm working fairly dry, I can come into this petal. If things were really wet, I'd have to kind of pause, but I'm okay. Once again, make sure I maintain that nice line there so it shows the petals are separated. This one, we don't want it to blend these two together, right? So kind of trying to hit the pink areas first and then come into the purples. Purple, and oh, that purple is the shape beside it. Oh well. Let's come over here and just, again, gently blend lighter areas and then into the darker areas. Just going to come up here and tweak this. There's kind of a triangular shape there. Maybe we'll get it on there a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is just use a brush with water and just soften the edge of this. Put a little bit of pink up in this section here. So putting water, and the paint isn't really dragging up with me. It's not wet enough. So what I'll do, I'll take my brush, my pencil, my pink pencil, and I'll just drop a little bit right along the edge of this. This is kind of a watercolor technique. Wet on wet, really, but this is optional. Just thought, hey, we could put a little bit of pink up here, just a little bit more. Okay, now last of all, this little shape here. So I'm going to wet things, just again, lights and then darks. Blend it together. Actually, I'm not loving this edge right here. I'm going to blend it a little bit too with whatever's on my brush. And then I'll come in and just kind of tweak this a little bit. I didn't quite get it earlier. I'm going to lift a little bit of the edge of this one so that it looks like it's connected, because I kind of went a little bit. This should look like it's all one petal if you were to go through there. So I'm just going to lift. So to lift, I'm washing and drying my brush and using my kind of damp brush and just lifting a bit of that pigment out. Yeah, that worked. Okay. The other place I'm going to do a little bit of tweaking is just a little tiny bit of pink right along the edge here, because I feel like I've got a little white stripe that doesn't actually come, it's not a white stripe all the way down in the photo, is it? There's a lighter area up here, but then it goes pink down here. So So those are minor tweaks, nothing major. I almost missed it, so it probably wouldn't have been a big deal if I had missed it. Let's do our greens now. So what I'm gonna do, we can decide if we want to touch this with a touch of green. You can kind of see the stigma a little bit here, and it's a little green. You could drop a tiny bit of this light green on there with a pencil. It's dry, that piece is dry, so I can touch it with the pencil. Then I'll come down and do the stem. The stem is super easy. We're just gonna color it in first with our lighter green. You can come all the way to the bottom, or if you kind of like a little bit of a rough, kind of scribbly look, you can just kind of do something like that too. Either way works. Yeah, I'm dry enough. I can come up to here with this green. Try not to color the tulip, but come right up to it, and then just fill the rest in with that green. And I'm going to come out on top with a darker green as well. This chrome oxide green is a nice dark green, and if you look in the reference photo, you can see it's kind of under, look in the area of shadow up here at the top of this little tulip, and it kind of lightens off as it works its way down. So I'm just going to go something like that. I'm going to use both colors at the same time rather than layering, because the stem is very simple. Sometimes you can do that in a flower as well, but the flower was a little bit more complex, which is why I didn't do that. Then I'm going to start in the lightest areas and just blend the light area and work my way towards the dark. Isn't that neat how that just transitioned as I went from light to dark, kind of going this up and down, scrubbing, blending motion. We got a soft, beautiful edge. So easy, effortless. Coming up here, I'm just going to refine the edges of this a little bit. It's the edges of my stem look a touch fuzzy just from the coloring, so I'm just going to just softly come along here, wash and dry my brush. Any areas that I want to just kind of gently soften, I can. I like that though. I feel like that worked out really well. So then I just want to mention one thing. Right here, you can see this lighter area where there's like a transition where it's like paint and then kind of stopped. That was from the last layer that I did where I pulled the paint down, but I didn't have water in this area. I can just gently kind of scrub that edge with one of my brushes. This is the number 8, but anyone will do, and it'll just gently soften that up. That was with water. I have water in my brush. Oh, and let's just tap a little bit right here where we added that green. You can even add a little bit right off of our pencil. I keep calling it a brush. Off the pencil if we want to. We tap a little bit in there. You want to make sure things aren't too wet, but again, we were working pretty dry, so we can get away with this. I might even pick the darker green up that I used and just go tap a little bit in there too, so it shows. There, I think that shows up a bit better. Tap, tap with some water. I'm just seeing I need a little bit more pink here. I liked how this was, but I can see that it's just almost a little bit too yellow, isn't it? So let's just put a little bit, just gently. There, and maybe just a tiny little bit along the edge here. I'm going to use a little bit of a, I mean, you could use it, kind of the stroke motion, but it's so tiny. I might just kind of do a little bit of a circular thing as well. So it's definitely darker, just along that bottom edge. Something like so. I think that's going to be good, just even like that once I blend it out. So I'll do one shape at a time. I'll do the lighter one, and then I'll do the dark one. I might have to let it dry just for a couple seconds between because they're touching each other. So I'll just come in the lightest section into the darks, just kind of like almost jiggling a little bit to kind of blend that around. Yeah, I think that's an improvement. Just lift a little tiny bit, come up to there. Okay, I'm going to give that just a few seconds to dry. I could blend this a little bit. It looks a little bit like it could have just a touch more blending. Let's bring my paper towel in. I'm going to let this dry for just a minute, and then I will come in and just do that other section. All right, I gave that a few seconds with the hair dryer, and maybe I'll just pull a little more pink even with the pencil, and then I'll bring my water back in here, and we'll just gently do a little tiny bit of blending. I don't even want too much water on my brush because this is just a tiny touch. There we go. I think that improved things a bit. All right, so there is our beautiful tulip. I hope this video inspired you to pick up your watercolor pencils and try them, and that this tutorial brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye.